Welcome once again to Breakfast Central. We start off the conversations this morning by bringing you a roundup of some of the stories from East Africa. And we have Darren Bartlett joining us from Kampala, Uganda. Good morning, Darren, and how are you today?
I'm fine. Good morning. How are you doing today?
We're fantastic on this side of the continent. Let's get into the discussions this morning. There is news about the doubling of value-added tax on petroleum products. Of course, here in Nigeria, there was a removal of subsidy, which was announced, and Nigerians are also dealing with that. But tell us about how it's affecting households, motorists, distributors, and the likes in Kenya.
As a matter of fact, I should say that what the Kenyans went through when the war had just broken out between Russia and Ukraine is just something that's going to be happening. Because if you remember that when the war broke out, there was less supply of oil, petrol, products, and then eventually companies started hoarding petrol, and fuel prices went up. They skyrocketed up. Now the government came in and, of course, put subsidies, made it a little bit friendly for them to consume. But it's all gone. That means that they are going to pay 16% again VAT on fuel products, including petrol itself. What is so interesting is that in 2018, President Uhuru Kenyatta, who President Ruto served as a deputy at that time, they reduced the VAT from 16 to 8, and then Ruto comes in, they increase it back to from 8 to 16. And the reasoning behind Ruto's government is simple. We need to be able to finance our budget that we have passed in Parliament, and we cannot go on borrowing money. So one, we have to finance the debt that we have, but also two, we have to be able to finance the budgets that we've passed in terms of developing the country. But the effect that is going to happen is going to just trickle down to the least person who Ruto called Mama Mboga. Mama Mboga is basically the woman who sells vegetables in the market. So the transportation cost of those vegetables from the garden to the market is going to go up. The transportation of normal feeds, farmers transporting their foods into the market is going to go up. Manufacturing cost is going to go up. Every single item that a Kenyan is going to touch is actually going to go up. And yesterday when the 188 MPs stood up and said, we are voting for this because they believe that their agenda is to relieve the government from debt, the opposition, especially the Azimio La Moja people, felt that this bill is against all the Kenyans, it's anti-people. As a matter of fact, like you read in the newspaper Daily Nation today, where they are planning to have meetings, and we expect that they could actually go to the streets because of the high cost of living that is expected to happen starting next week on Monday. And hopefully at that time I'll actually be in Kenya, so I'll be there to experience what is going to be happening there.
Okay, I'd just like to quickly touch on that a little. I've seen several explanations as to why this is happening. Of course, we know that the main reason would be that the Kenyan government is trying to finance its budget without borrowing. And there's also been comparison made to Tanzania, Uganda, and how they already have 18% VAT on the price of petrol. So there have been predictions that this bill and this increase would actually be the fall of William Ruto's time. I mean, they refer to it as regime. A certain Mr. Wandai was the one who predicted that this would be the fall of William Ruto's regime, according to what he calls it. What do you think, or how much impact do you think all of these changes would affect William Ruto in his time in office, and the people, and of course with how they're reacting to him? Do you think that it's going to really be the fall of William Ruto?
Olivia, I think sometimes whenever logic meets sentiment, those two just can't connect. Every time someone is trying to reason having logic and then you use sentimental issues, which politics is actually sentimental. And they will always say that it's going to fail. But let's go back to the times of Mwai Kibaki. When Mwai Kibaki came to power, of course, he included some taxes that the economy of Kenya worked so well. He had criticism in the beginning, but eventually they actually believe that he's the president who directed the economy of Kenya. Over time, in 2 or 3 years, by the time he finishes the term, we shall be able to judge and say, now Kenya is indebted this much. How much debt are they paying? Just go to Tanzania when Magufuli became president. With his radical methods in the beginning, cancelling deals from the Chinese, cancelling borrowing money, cancelling travels out. In fact, if you remember, Magufuli rarely traveled out of Africa or even out of Tanzania. But he laid a foundation, the economic foundation for the country that they are enjoying right now. They are in fact catching up with Tanzania to become, they are right now the second biggest economy in East Africa. But most likely they could take over if the inflation in Kenya increases the way it is going. So we can only judge after 1 year, and we see that at the end of next year, have we paid the debt of Kenyans? Because they were only paying 200 and about 16 billion, but now they are going to be paying 400. So they doubled how much they're going to be paying to be able to finish this debt quickly. Yes, people will be affected, but we shall judge the president when the other economic, opportunities he has created work. Is Mama Boga, is the farming going to work? Is the manufacturing going to work? Is the infrastructure, building going to work? If those work, it's easy to turn a blind eye and say, okay, fuel has gone up, sugar has gone up, and ugali has gone up. So it's at the end of the day, it's always how much you sacrifice, what did you use when you buy the loan for, and what initiatives did you put to make sure that you pay back the loan quickly and you still remain independent. That is the most important thing. Yeah. So right now, it's for me, political sentiment here and there, but it is what it is.
Well, let's hope, William Ruto is able to, get Kenyans to understand what his plans are. Now, let's move away from Kenya and talk about the developments in Somalia. We hear that the African Union Transition Mission in Somalia, ATMIS, has begun withdrawing troops from Somalia. Now, talk about how this move will impact the security situation in the country as they, of course, continue to battle Al-Shabaab.
The timing is a little bit tough because just a few weeks ago, Uganda or the UPDF, Uganda People's Defense Force, under ATMIS, which is the Africa Transition Mission in Somalia, lost 54 soldiers who were attacked by Al-Shabaab. And the whole reason why ATMIS, or by then they were still AU before they changed into ATMIS, supported by the UN, went into Somalia, is to kind of stabilize the country, to have a recognized government. They didn't have the government of Somalia had completely collapsed. And their politics centers around so many clans, about the 5 clans, but there are some clans that allegedly support the Al-Shabaab, and that's why these attacks have always been happening, and sometimes they actually go silent. It's about who supports them, who doesn't, who supports what, and things like that. So it's a political, chessboard. If you look at where they are right now, with these attacks that have happened in Kenya recently, at the border of Kenya, and then the killings of UPDF, there is fear that once ATSIM leaves, like they are leaving, 2,000 soldiers are leaving this June, and another will leave next year, which will be now the end of ATMIS in Somalia. There is a big fear that the government may collapse again. They're giving examples of what happened in Afghanistan, but the moment the USA left, the government collapsed into the hands of the Taliban. Now, that is the biggest fear that is going on. And first, we need to ask questions as, is the Somali army capable of holding the security of the country? Because the ATMIS has been acting like the government army. They have tried to train, the Somali army. Ethiopia has been training them, Eritrea trained them, Uganda trained them, Burundi trained them. But there's that fear that they are not ready, they are not capable of handling the security issues in Somalia. In fact, their National Security Intelligence Officer, spoke and said that as of now, Al-Shabaab is on a down, they are on down trend, like they are really going down. It feels like they're weakened, contrary to what we've just seen. But you just never know. Maybe they are in better position. They have the security, the intelligence to understand the circumstances under which the government is running. But he does not rule out the fact that it will be very difficult fighting these, Al-Shabaab people. So it's just a matter of time. Let's see what happens in 2024 when they fully leave. You never know. Maybe what is disturbing Al-Shabaab, because the reasons why Al-Shabaab attacked Uganda, attacked Kenya, attacked Tanzania was because that the army was present in Somalia, and they say, you go back to your countries and sort your issues. We don't want you. We shall sort our issues, go back to your countries. We don't want your foreign intervention. And that's the reasoning they gave to attack these countries. So maybe when these countries leave, there will be peace. But again, before 2007, when the different armies went into Somalia, the government had collapsed. There was high levels of insecurity. We're just hoping that because, they had a meeting in Uganda in April, And President Yoweri Museveni advised them. He advised actually the AU and the UN not to lift the arms embargo off Somalia, because then people may be able to buy guns and transfer them to Al Shabaab. So better to leave them the way they are before lifting the embargoes, assess the situation, then later on lift them, but they should not cut fundings as well. So do not lift the arms embargo and do not cut funding when the ATMIS leaves finally. So
All right.
it's a tricky conversation. Yeah.
It absolutely is, but it's a conversation that needs to, to continue. Somalia, of course, deserves to stay as one united nation. We hope really that they understand what's at stake with the breakdown in security. But let's hold on, Darren. Let's go to Tobago now. Take the conversation to Southern Africa for, of course, to some of the things happening there. Tobago, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, guys. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Great to have you. Now, in Botswana, it's not been very interesting for some of the residents or homeowners. They are faced by a move by government to tear down fences and demolish their properties. What exactly is going on there?
Now, what seems to be happening, Osaki, is that government or the land board, what we call a land board here, an authority that oversees land in the Mogodisane area, have said the villagers or residents who live in that region, some of them at a certain location are squatters and are occupying the space illegally. They've come out to say the certificates that they have used in also connecting water and electricity are fake and don't seem to be legitimate. So at this time, they had this week, or starting this week, moved to remove fences from some of the homesteads located that side, and the caterpillars were on site also to bring down some of the houses. And in us visiting that location as journalists, we found that some of the residential locations there are actually well-built houses that Botswana have, or Botswana would have spent so much money to actually build such a structure. So now what has since happened is that the Minister of Lands has come out to say there should be after of course we've lobbied and said it's uncalled for, looking at the fact that it's winter. Where do you expect them to all go? So the minister then moved to say the process of demolition should be halted. But what the residents are currently doing is that they want to now start exploring legal action against government. You can imagine Botswana's in a stuck winter right now. So it was really a daunting situation for over 100 Botswana who occupy that space.
Wow, that's a very interesting situation there in Botswana. We, of course, would like to have an update when we have one from you. But let's head over to Zimbabwe, where in an interesting turn of events, we're seeing that the registration fee for presidential candidates is now pegged at $20,000. This is, of course, 20 times higher than what it was in 2018. It was $1,000 then. So while those, wishing to run for parliament will now pay $1,000, and it's just a far cry from what we saw in 2018. So as it stands, you must have a whole lot of money if you are running for office. What does this say? First of all, let's look at how it's impacting or shaping the elections. We know the elections are coming on 23rd of August. How is it shaping the elections in Zimbabwe? And what is the broader reflection of this? What does it tell us about elections and governance in Africa?
Yes, I think, Olive, thank you for that question. I think now what we're seeing is that African leaders, I've always maintained, or observing, of course, what our leaders have carried on doing in Africa. I think we have a leadership crisis that we need to really confront as citizens and nations across Africa, because you'd find that our leaders say one thing and do the opposite of what they're saying. Mnangagwa has been at the forefront of really saying he wants to see a better Zimbabwe, and he's really said, he's mounting a concerted effort towards democracy, towards reduction of corruption. And what we're seeing right now is pure corruption, and it's really counterintuitive when you are looking at democracy. If you are going to do this in a nation that's impoverished, such as Zimbabwe, you are actually now taking money away from the people once again, money that they don't have, and you are saying for you to exercise your democratic rights, for you to actually have people that you want within government. This is what we are doing to actually limit these people from now having the capacity to run for parliamentary positions. So it's really quite disheartening, and I think we need, as journalists, also to really stand up, and also I'm looking to also contact SADC to actually find out what their views are in terms of what we see happening in Zimbabwe in relation to the election, the upcoming election.
Right.
Very interesting.
Still in Zimbabwe, of course, looking at the elections, we're counting down. It's less than 2 months, if I'm correct. Okay, about roughly 2 months to the 23rd of August. We have I think 3 major people running persons. There's the Emerson Mnangagwa. We also have Nelson Chamisa. It's just quite an interesting run we're seeing there. There's also been an assurance that we'll see free, fair, credible elections as Zimbabwe now has a mature democracy. Do you agree with that? Do you think that Zimbabwe has a mature democracy now, and that what we're expecting to see in these coming elections would be free, fair, and credible? When, if you compare that, to the elections we've had on the continent in several other countries, it's been marred with, frivolities here and there. So what would you say are your projections for the expectations on the 23rd of August?
Olive, I completely disagree with the fact that this will be fair and fair elections. Already we had seen that there were inconsistencies in terms of the ballot papers from the get-go, before we even heard of this new ridiculous increase in terms of the amount of money that it takes to actually run for these positions. So I think this is pure gaslighting. Already we are seeing movements, and we are seeing strategies that are contradictory in terms of us saying this will be a fair and an election that is not marred with corruption. I think we are really just going to, if this follows through as it is currently, we are really going to see a gross violation of democracy in Zimbabwe, and I think it's going to plunge the nation into further catastrophe in terms of its economic standing, because I don't think any election body or any international player as well looking in on the situation is going to fall for the fact that the election is going to be fair. It's already unfair as it is.
We, of course, will follow up. We wish Zimbabweans the very best. We hope that they are able to make a decision that will lead their country forward in the best way from the 23rd of August. I'm sure that we, of course, will broadcast the elections live here on Breakfast Central, on News Central TV. But